Well, here it is, the full review of Phoenotopia. I have played this game for a long time over the last few weeks, and I'm sure, as you know from the preview, it's quite good. And although it was originally a Flash-based browser game, the developer stripped it back in its entirety, completely rebuilt it from the ground up, and the console version of Phoenotopia was born, almost like the title itself, being derived from Phoenix and Utopia. But will this one rise from the ashes, or crash and burn? Let's find out. You play out your adventure as Gale, described as a simple villager who simply wants to go about her daily life until everything changes. A mysterious presence abducts the entire village and a grand adventure unfolds through which Gale will experience the wonders of this beautiful world, filled as it is with mysterious sights and sounds, strange and unusual quirky characters to meet, and dungeons. Oh, glorious dungeons. She'll encounter lost family members, deranged kings, and underground cults. While everything's cheery on the surface, do not mistake Phoenotopia for merely a child's game, and I was pleasantly surprised by the amount of dark and twisted moments that were on offer, which typically take the form of scripted dialogue moments, which left me a little bit surprised but equally pleased, like seeing these two idiots locked up in a cage. Yes please. As far as gameplay goes then, well, you control the character from a side view perspective. You have the ability to jump, roll, and crawl your way through the world, with each of these abilities costing you stamina points on a bar at the top, which can be increased as you go throughout the game by finding special vials. As you'd hope, Gale finds a number of different weapons, and these range from the wooden to the steel and so on, and gradually increase in potency. She has access earlier on to a catapult, but also there's a crossbow you can purchase, a lantern which has to be cranked, as called a crank lantern, for you to explore dark and dangerous environments, and a nifty little rubber ring that she can put round her waist to help her get across bodies of water, as she never learned to swim. Now, unlike recent Zelda entries in the series on Switch, this title has proper dungeons, and I really mean that. Not only do they include puzzle platforming, there are also a good variety of more subtle puzzles which will rely on the player actually using their noggin. Small pieces of information may be on a computer screen, as there is a technological aspect to the title, and you may find yourself reading through old messages only to discover the formula to defeating one of the hard bosses. You'll have to pay close attention to small snippets of dialogue, as they may hold riddles within them that lead to your eventual progression. And I'm not gonna lie, I've been stuck more than a few times already, but when you do finally solve it and the solution presents itself, you realise it's, for the most part, a very logical progression in terms of how you find your way from A to B. Aside from puzzle platforming, you'll also learn a few songs along the way using your magical flute, and once learned, these will allow you access to the area matching the same symbol of the song. There are, as mentioned, loads of hidden areas that will also allow you to learn different songs to get to them, and your efforts are usually rewarded in the form of a heart, which will increase your overall health, or the aforementioned energy vials. There's one element to the game which I'm not overly enthused about, and that's how difficult it is to get money. In the earlier stages of the game, you'll be finding treasure chests littered all over the place, and acquiring the necessary funds to purchase essential items like the crank lamp aren't too much of a hindrance. Now, in hindsight, and this is a bit of a tip, I'd have bought the rod as the first thing I purchased, done a ton of fishing, and then traded in all the fish for cash at one of the recycler machines. But I didn't do that, and eventually I couldn't afford the fishing rod, and it took me ages to get the necessary funds. But yeah, I've kind of just told you what to do. Other than your main and overarching quests that are quite overt and obvious to the player, there are a number of small activities that may be offered to you by side characters. Things like helping a chef to improve his cooking, or getting the compost for a gardener, will all lead to you getting character permanent upgrades. In each of the major cities of the town, there's also a shooting competition with different tiers and rewards based on your skill. There's a hairdresser's that you can attend to get a different look and colour, and there are some quests that actually utilise this as a requirement. One other slight negative of Phoenotopia are difficulty spikes. As I mentioned, there are a number of boss encounters, and the second one, I believe it was unbelievably difficult. There was a method that I discovered that made it doable, but for a few frustrating hours there, I was just spamming the same death over and over again. It's important to note with Phoenotopia that you're not on any strict linear path. Now, while there is a next progressive point in terms of story, you can just go off and explore different caves on the map or try and find those hidden areas without being penalized as a player. And just as in a Metroidvania, I love how each time you discover new items, say the bombs, you'll have those small eureka moments where you're like, oh yeah, I passed those destructible areas when I first started the game, but I couldn't get past them. And it's exploration and discovery that sums up the title in a nutshell. And on a personal level, I enjoy the fact that it has that cheery, butter wouldn't melt in its mouth facade, yet you'll be getting your ass handed to you on a plate every time you face a different enemy, until it is you work out exactly their unique patterns. That's not to say that everything's difficult and it's not all I'm gonna die every 5 minutes, but that exploration is also met with equal challenge, and if I ever see another one of those bullet firing bloody fish, that's me done. Along your way there are a number of save points. Some of these will revive your health entirely if you perish, but it's a good tip to make sure that you eat the food that you've got before you save, so that if you do have to keep respawning, you're respawning with full health. On the note of food, there are several bonfires throughout the game, which can be lit with a piece of flint if you find one lying around on the floor and you simply hit it with your weapon. This is then used to cook using a mini game, not too dissimilar from Breath of the Wild. And while yes, you can eat the food raw if you want, the potency is massively increased by cooking it up nicely. Unfortunately, if you burn it over and over again, like me, it's only good as compost. Ay caramba. From hour to hour, moment to moment, Phoenotopia is a delightful game to play. It controls well, and despite a few difficulty spikes, I'm absolutely loving every moment with it, trying to completely 100% the game. So far I've put 25 hours in, and I don't think I'm anywhere near it. Story and gameplay for me then, score 18 out of 20. A few too many difficulty spikes might put some players off. While the controls, they're almost perfect, there was a slight issue I had whereby crouching and then moving was a bit difficult, but it's something you use so rarely it's barely noticed. Controls score 18 out of 20. In terms of the visuals and audio performance, you are looking at a silky smooth 60 FPS, lovely parallax scrolling, and a style not too dissimilar to something like Moonlighter, crossed with, well, classic Zelda. Everything's bright and colourful and cheery until you head below the surface, and there are some darker, more mysterious and, quite frankly, a little bit more scary environments. There is, as you would expect, some character repetition between NPCs, but what they have done is provided each character with excellent dialogue. Although there's no voice acting here, there's a Sims-style noise when different characters speak, and the text has this wibbly-wobbly thing going on that I kinda like. The composer for the game grew up learning and playing and humming and just living Chrono Cross music, and that definitely shows in the soundtrack here. Music's excellent. There are times when you'll be humming along, and there are even moments where you can pay a musician to play a certain piece of music, and no joke, I sat for 10 minutes just listening to these beautiful piano melodies. There is some repetition. In certain towns, if particularly you find some area difficult to get past, you will notice this, and that could irritate if you're there for long enough. But the riffs aren't overly short, and the dungeon music is excellent. Sound effects are familiar in certain areas, with the charged sound of your club exactly like the small fairy in Zelda Ocarina of Time. And I do really enjoy the implementation of the flute. Yes, let's be honest, they copied that a little bit, but it works as such a chill gameplay mechanic, and it's just fun to muck about with. Back to the visuals briefly, I think they've done a really nice job in terms of variety. You'll be shifting from desert sands to lush green forests and onto the aqua-filled red cherry blossom forests and everything in between. I think the only area that isn't fantastic is the overworld map. Some of the enemies that pop up and chase you just look a little bit naff, but I wouldn't be surprised if once again this is more of a homage to the classics of the genre. Phoenotopia conveys a sense of mystery through its surroundings, but also of style in its presentation, with slick performance in docked and handheld. For me, visuals and performance score 19 out of 20, while the audio is excellent, and the fantastic soundtrack also scores 19 out of 20. Now, Phoenotopia Awakening is going to set you back $19.99. You might be thinking, well, what about the other prices, Mark? And unfortunately, the developer had a few issues with that, and the game won't release in the EU and other regions for about 3 weeks. As we all know, it's very easy to hop onto the eShop of another region and purchase a game, so, you know, why don't you just buy it from the US eShop? If you're waiting on a physical, I'm not entirely sure when that's coming, but I'm sure it's something the developer would love to do. As it stands, I believe all their eggs are in this basket, and I really hope that people embrace it. $20 is not, in my opinion, at all a steep price to ask for a title that's as slick and polished as this. There are some who have lamented the lack of dungeons and classic Zelda features in Breath of the Wild, and for those people I would say, go out and pick up Phoenotopia. As I've said, I've spent 25 hours playing so far, and I feel like I'm about maybe 2/3 of the way through the game. It is a shame that there isn't a definite physical version so far, but as it stands, I think this is well worth picking up. It scores a value score of 18 out of 20. So there we have it, Phoenotopia Awakening is an absolute triumph on the Nintendo Switch. It's delightful to actually have a Nintendo Switch exclusive title for once that's decent, or actually just have one at all. It scores an overall SwitchUp score of 92%. Not only does this deserve to be purchased, it really does need a physical version. Developer, come on now, you can make it happen. Speak to Limited Run, I'm sure they'll sort you out. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this one. A big thanks to all of you who subscribed recently, and for all the positive feedback we've had on our new Should I Refund series, which just allows Glenn and I to cover off even more content in the style and quality hopefully that you're used to. Big thanks to our patrons who support us each and every month, and as always, for all things Switch, all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!